everybody. I'm Mike Joy. At this time each Sunday, Neil Bonnett would come into your living room here on the Nashville Network.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Neil Bonnett. You know, there was a legendary stock car racer, the late Bobby Isaacs. He had a favorite saying inscribed on the back of his watch. It said, "Winners never quit, and quitters never win."
For the last 2 years, he's talked to winners, joked with them, traded stories with them, and just generally carried on in a manner that made all of us proud to be associated with him. Friday here at Daytona, those stories stopped. And the fun times became bittersweet memories of someone we respected, loved, and admired. Neil was once again trying to get here, to racing's hallowed ground, its victory lane. But Neil Bonnett was doing what he most loved to do, running flat out on one of the nation's fastest superspeedways.
And if Neil were here, he'd say, listen, tell him about the good times, and the great rides, and all the fun we had. So today, we'll do just that for this most magnificent winter.
One of my fondest memories, Neil, is last year when we won the Busch Clash, and Neil was in the victory circle with us at the Busch Clash, and you could see the look in Neil's eye that you knew that Neil was going to drive again, and that's what he was going to do. It's what he wanted to do. And I guess the memory of looking at Neil Bonnett and the look in his eye standing in victory circle at Daytona is probably will stick in my mind forever.
I remember running behind him at Michigan one year, and he would drive the wheels off a car, and we used to laugh about it. But I followed him down in turn 3, and his front tires were working like this, just back and forth, and we just got on the power steering. And I said, man, what are you doing driving the car that hard? And he said, I'm not driving the car. He said, I don't turn the wheels at all. And I said, man, they're going back and forth like this. And he went out the next practice, and he come in, and he said, you know, I think you're right. He said, I think the front wheels are going back and forth, back and forth. So he had him slow the steering box down. The next thing he did, he went out and run all the way in the corner and run up next to the wall and slap side his car. And he come over to me and he said, I like it better when the wheels go back and forth, back and forth.
Well, Neil was always a special guy. I think everybody in this garage area was a friend of his, and he took a lot of time with different people, and my dad was one of them. And I remember in Charlotte, Neil had a little 32 Ford, and I had a 31 Chevrolet, and we were talking about the cars at the Speedway, and my dad said, you know, I like the older cars that are stock. And Neil said, well, I've got a 38 Chevrolet. And my dad said, well, you know, I've always kind of wanted one of those cars. And the next day, the car was delivered to Charlotte, and Neil gave it to my dad. And it was a nice automobile. And, you know, people don't do things like that unless they have a big heart. And he just cared for so many, and so many cared for him.
Well, I just remember that white and black car used to run down at Birmingham, and the duels that he and Red Farmer and Bobby and those guys used to put on. There's one thing about it, nobody can say that Neil wasn't a hard charger. I mean, he got every bit he could out of a race car.
He won a race at Richmond, and in the old days, you could write and get back home in time to see what the 11 o'clock news had to say. Well, on this particular Sunday night at 11 o'clock, the news announcer was very, very raw, very green, made a lot of mistakes. And he got to the Richmond race, and this is what he said. He said, today in Richmond, the race was won by the famous French race driver Niles Bonnett. I hit the floor when I heard that. I couldn't wait to get to Neil. So I told a couple of buddies of mine, we went in the garage area the next race and started yelling, Niles Bonnett, Niles Bonnett. And he looked at us like we were crazy. He said, what are you boys talking about? And said, we told him the Richmond story. Your name is now Niles Bonnett. It got to be crazy. Bobby Allison was calling him Niles Bonnett. We had guys paging him from up there, the PA system. Niles Bonnett, please report to the NASCAR trailer. It was hilarious. So he decided that for a while there, he'd call himself Niles Bonnett. When anybody called him Neil, he wouldn't answer.
For several seasons, Neil had an on-track teammate when he drove for Junior Johnson. Yesterday, the co-executive producer of Winners, Ken Squire, sat down and talked to Darrell Waltrip.
Well, you know, I guess really when you look at Neil, sort of exemplifies what a lot of us in the garage area are all about. Hard-working, family man, talented, could do just about anything, you know. I mean, I've told him a number of times how thrilled I was for him, how proud I was of him to be able to do the show he was doing, to be the host of that show. I never really thought about Neil being a TV star, but he was. And I think that just shows the dedication that he had. Not just he raced and he was a star. He went into television and he was a star. And I'm sure that he's a star wherever he is today. And I was kidding him Thursday in the hospital. We were having our physical, our annual physical, and I said, Neil, don't you think I ought to do a little cameo, you know, just kind of walk through this, maybe just walk by while you're doing an intro from your den there in Hueytown, just let people know that I'm still hanging around. And we laughed about that, and he was telling me about being in Pomona, and he said, I told him, somebody asked about that, and he said, I told him I wish he was here now, he could do this show. And we just had a lot of fun. The show we did, kidding, and it was purely and simply kidding each other about, you know, taking the show. Nobody could do the show like Neil did, and it's his show, and we were just playing with him, and we had a lot of fun with that, and just so many things come to mind, and just gonna miss him a lot. I mean, you know, you turn on the TV and you're gonna see him for a while. He's gonna be there doing his show, and to know that he's not really there is pretty sad.
Memories of racing with Neil. I mean, he could get the needle out. Didn't matter when it was, didn't matter where it was. He could always get you one more time.
We were racing Richmond, Virginia. I don't know, it was back the late 70s, early 80s. I don't remember exactly. And he was leading the race late. And caution came out, and he stayed out, and I came out driving Junior's car. I think I came in, I got 4 tires, so my car was fast. I caught Neil with about 5 or 6 laps to go, and I couldn't get by him. And so I went down into first turn there at Richmond, Old Richmond, and just drove in way over my head and body slammed him. I didn't mean to. And got Neil sideways, and he run up and brushed the wall, and I got by and I won the race, and Neil run, I don't know, second or third. And I'm coming down pit lane and all my glory, and I've won, and that's what it's all about. And I got the net down, and I'm waving to the crowd, and about that time I thought my neck was going to break. And I looked in the mirror, and Neil kind of reminded me on pit lane that he didn't really like the way I got by him there at the end of the race. And we had a lot of races like that. We had several like that. And then we were teammates at juniors, you know, and Neil was a great teammate because he never complained. You got a guy like me that complains all the time. You need a teammate that never complains, and he never complained. If his car was fast, he was happy. If it wasn't, big deal. That's just the kind of guy he was. I mean, real non-assuming and easygoing. You didn't really want to make him mad, if you know what I mean.
How do we cope?
Well, as I went to the truck yesterday to call my wife, it was incredibly hard for me to call my wife, and I didn't know what I was going to say to her. And as I was sitting there on the couch thinking about what I was going to tell Stevie, I thought, what if I had to call Susan or Neil's mom and dad? I don't know. These people they're not just people. They're not just acquaintances. They're not somebody that you've seen a time or two. They're people that you love. They're people that you truly, when you see them, you hug them. When you see them, you kiss them. They're truly members of a family. I've known Neil for 25 years. I've known Susan, the kids, Neil's mom and dad. I don't know how all you can do is that very thing, is a hug, and you don't understand. I don't like to ever go up to someone and say, I know how you feel. I don't know how they feel. I know how I feel, and I'm sorry, and I'm hurt. But I can't imagine what they're going through, and I never have been able to with Davey or with all the guys that we've known and loved so much. I can only know how I feel, and I hurt, and I can't imagine how they feel. All I know is I'm sorry, and I wish there's something I could do to make it all go away and be better, but just pray. Just pray and have faith and know that Neil's death, the Lord has a plan, and maybe someone else will be saved, or maybe millions will be saved because of what happened to Neil. That's the only hope you have.
The always eloquent Darrell Waltrip. Equally eloquent in his silence has been Dale Earnhardt. Earnhardt has said, I am not ready to share my feelings with anyone about Neil Bonnett. The safest place for me to be right now is in my race car on that racetrack. But for us who have followed Winners from its inception, we can share some moments with Dale and Neil from that very first episode and some other moments from Winners.
You better move.
I got the idea.
Oh, I ain't caught that 11-pounder right here. Who? Hank?
Ooh, let me get out there and help. See if I can find it. Put it back in.
Yeah. You put it in there to start with.
Ernie said that you put that deal together for him. Y'all rode by, and you lined up all the sponsorship, but Earnhardt was going to pay for it. He says that he never got anything. He's claiming that maybe you got like, he said he got a few parts, and maybe you got 2,000 and kept it. That's not my contention. If you kept it, we won't air this if I get half of it.
Well, you know,
Junior Johnson's training school was these little winding, twisting, crooked roads through these mountains in rural North Carolina. He was trying to outrun the revenuers hauling moonshine, a race he had to win. And if you roll this window down and stick your head out and the wind's blowing just right, you can still smell that good old sour mash in these mountains. Just in case y'all heard a little bit of noise in the background, this right here is the culprit. And you think racing's a handful. There you go, try that for a while.
she's a handful. She's a handful, but she's great.
He's different from most of the Winston Cup drivers. For one thing, he's a northerner. For another, he's got a college diploma.
Here's what I get for not reading the questions ahead of time. While you were juniors, here comes the second team rolling in. Guess who? It was me. Yeah. And, you know, there's times, Darrell, that the thing just doesn't work, just like the deal at Nashville. You know, it's on the... Why have I got to ask? I didn't even want to bring this up. But anyway, the two-car team, at times, there's always something going to pop up that causes a problem. I mean, the deal at Nashville, you know, I said I won, you said you won, but best I remember, you got the trophy, so you won the race. But it does cause problems having two cars run out the same place like that.
Well, it did.
So this guy calls me up, and he says, won't you come be on the show in Nashville? Okay, I'll come do it. You know, that's my one appearance. I'm going to get it out of the way. I'm going to be over with. Then you just send me my check.
Rake in the money.
Rake in the money. We're going to make millions. We're going to make more than Slim Whitman made off his TV album. I'm telling you, we're going to make a bunch of money. So I leave there and get on a plane and fly to California because we're racing at Riverside at that point in time. So I get off the plane out there, and I'm talking to some fans and stuff, and they said, hey, man, we saw you in Nashville. Saw you on Nashville Now. And I said, Rick? I said, were y'all just in Nashville on vacation or something? They said, no. I said, well, how'd you see it? Oh, we get it on TV out here. And I said, what do you mean you get it on TV? And they said, you've never seen Ralph Emery? And I said, no, I don't know who Ralph Emery is.
You just leave it in Nashville.
Hey, I thought it was like a Nashville program. You know what I mean? And like 500, 1 million people in Nashville is going to see it, but the rest of the country's not going to know how bad a singer I am.
Neil Bonnett was a great host of Winners. He was equally great as a TV analyst, as your sidekick in the booth. He had an innate sense about what people needed to know, and he could communicate it so not just race fans, but so everyone could enjoy it. He was a tremendous ambassador for the sport. For my nickel, he was the best analyst in the history of the game.
They're averaging 150 miles an hour around this place now. That's between 165 and 170 miles an hour going in turn one right here. Very tough. It's like slot cars around this racetrack. There's 2 one-mile tracks on the circuit, Rockingham and Dover. This place is 2 seconds faster. Drivers are going to have to stay on top of the race cars or they're going to be in a lot of trouble. The monster just got meaner.
He knew what it was like to go out and run, you know, and lead a race and have a shot at winning a race and lose a race in the last 2 or 3 laps, or to go out and wreck early, or to go out and break a motor and have your hopes be dashed real quick. And he understood that, and you could tell by the questions that he asked the drivers, or when he was in the booth, a commentator would say something and Neil would say, well, maybe the driver's thinking this, or maybe this happened, or maybe that happened. You know, I think he gave the fan a totally different perspective because he had been there before.
He spun, he got the car straightened out, and his left rear tire was flat, and this is the leader's coming. He's wanting to beat him back to the line and not go a lap down. Look, he almost pins Ward Burton on the wall. He's trying so hard to get back on that flat tire, he just turned it right around in front of the field.
He brought a new energy to our whole racing group. It was like put an IV in your arm. He just gave us new energy, new excitement.
He's coming down the corner. You see the nose of the car. Gets down under him right there. Payne's coming back down the inside line. It's just a simple case of both guys are trying for the same piece of racetrack. Payne didn't know he was there, and I think Green thought he might give him a little more room there, and they got hung up coming in the corner.
I think he had an uncanny ability to understand. He was fair with everybody, but he told the truth about what he's seen, and I think that's what made him so good.
Look at the car get loose right down. He's drove down the bottom of the track. That inside line, though, should be the preferred way around this place.
He was a very fierce competitor, but he loved what he was doing. And I've really come to respect him as a broadcaster. I think that he was destined to be the best auto racing analyst in all of motorsports.
Fuel's not going to be the question. It's going to be tire wear today.
He really had a gift for broadcasting and for bringing the race home to you. And he developed that in a career that saw some of the most spectacular victories and some of the most horrific crashes of any driver ever.
February 1983, last lap of the Busch Clash, Bonnett muscles past Darrell Waltrip. The melee ensues behind him. Bonnett comes off turn 4 to be declared the fastest of the fast. Wins the Busch Clash. Charlotte Motor Speedway, May 1983. One of 6 victories for the fabled Wood brothers. Here's another, November 1983 at Atlanta.
Coming to the inside, 3 wide behind him. Bonnett going to the inside. Cale Yarborough comes through. Baker falls to third.
Baker was a sitting duck, no question about it. He knew it. There was nothing he could do about it other than to try to draft back past him.
All right, keep your eye on number 28, Cale Yarborough, who's qualified for Daytona 500 at 201 miles an hour. He's got 1 shot left. Here they come to the line. Yarborough down the inside. Bonnett throws the block. Give it to Bonnett. 2 years in a row, he wins the Clash.
The first driver to ever do something.
In Richmond, Bonnett hard into the wall, breaks his neck, doesn't realize it for 2 days. Here at Charlotte, sustains a badly broken leg. But back at Richmond in '88, he scores the first of back-to-back wins for Butch Mock and Bob Rahilly.
Flipping over and flying apart, that's absorbing energy. But in a situation like Neil was in there, a car stopped right in front of him. He slammed into it. The steering wheel came up in his face, and I'm sure his body slammed into probably in the knees into the dashboard and his head into the roll cage. And that's why Neil Bonnett had the severity of the accident that he had.
Here at Talladega in July of '93, Bonnett goes airborne into the wall. Walked away chuckling about how he'd get him next time.
When Bobby Allison was injured in a short track crash at Elko, Minnesota, he brought a young pipe fitter and short track driver from Alabama as his relief to Richmond. Tired of answering questions, the young fella in a borrowed suit put a duct tape over the owner's name and put Neil Who with a question mark. Truly, Neil's benefactor and mentor was Bobby Allison. Ken Squire spoke with him.
You know, he was a friend that was a constant support. And early on, I knew who Neil was, but I didn't know him real well, and he didn't know me real well, but he had been driving some in the late model sportsman stuff around Birmingham, BIR, and Dixie Speedway at the time, I think, was still run a little bit, and of course Montgomery and Huntsville and so forth, and had been doing reasonably well, but you know, they had the difficulty of keeping the car as first class as they wanted to and that kind of thing. And I guess finally they decided that they couldn't afford to race it like they really wanted to. And about that period of time, I was struggling with them dang old Nashes, otherwise known as Matadors. And I was working out in the engine room, and it was like midnight or beyond midnight of the night going up to the first day of practice at Dover, Delaware, which that was a 24-hour run for us from Hueytown, Alabama to the Dover racetrack. And we weren't quite done. And he's back there, I just want to give you a hand, what do you want me to do? And we're turning a few wrenches. And we had the engine on what we call a three-legged engine stand. And he went to move it for me and pulled it over and it fell on him. And I was sure it broke his leg and, you know, I mean, really looked like it hurt him. And he jumped up and apologized for bending my engine up and, you know, stood that engine back up and wouldn't even allow himself to look to see how bad he was hurt. Now, he was standing back up, so his leg wasn't broken all the way in two. You know, we both could tell that. But he was really hurting, but he would not allow himself even to look down. And we continued on, got that engine finished up, and got the truck sent on. Then he went home. He wouldn't go to the doctor, wouldn't go like to the emergency room or anything. He went on home. And he went to work that next day. You know, he would work during the day, and then he'd come by the shop and work at night. But that's the kind of constant effort he gave me.
Did he ever change in those first days when he used to sweep up for you and come in after he'd finished work, won those Winston Cup races and beat doors with you? Did he ever really change?
I never saw him change. You know, it never was anything that I could pick up on or focus on.
You know, watching his hosting the Winter Show, he had a great knack, I thought, of putting people at ease when he was interviewing them, and could really draw out some interesting comments from his guests. And it was just his demeanor. I think he was just a kind of easygoing, very cool, very friendly, and had a lot of respect for his other drivers, and he respected them. So the sport's going to miss him.
1975, I left Daytona, went back to Alabama, and got my own short track car back together, and I started beating Neil pretty regular. And Bobby wanted to know what in the hell was wrong with Neil's car, and I said it's got the wrong driver in it. And you know, we joked about that, you know, and Neil and I worked together. He went to Nashville one night, I remember in particular, and I told him something to try on his car. I wasn't going that particular race. I had to go race somewhere else, and he went up there and he won the race. And he came back, and I asked him, I said, well, did you tell Bobby what you did? He said, no. He said, if I ever told Bobby what you told me to do, he'd get mad at me. So, you know, it was typical Neil, and he was always cutting up. He was very serious about his racing. But out of the race car, he had an air about him where he was fun to be around. And just like his TV shows and everything, anybody that watched Neil Bonnett on his show or anything pertaining to television and didn't like it, they're crazy.
I guess all I could say, you know, if I ever would want to set myself all over to be like somebody, I'd want to be like Neil Bonnett. You know, he was a close friend, great race driver, never had an enemy in the world, and you know, that's just a tribute to the kind of person Neil Bonnett was.
The charge was made by the media, and that it was driver error. How many miles did he drive in Childress cars primping for this 94 Daytona 500?
You know, Neil ran a lot of miles, thousands of miles with us. It wasn't driver error. None of us will probably never know what it was, but it wasn't driver error. Last test here, you know, we were down, had almost 500 miles on the tires, just like we'd want to get in a race situation, and Neil would come in and say, "Boys, I'm really getting loose off the corner over here, and but I can hang on some more." And you just don't drive a race car in those conditions. Neil was a great race driver. It wasn't driver error.
All those deals you guys made. I mean, you guys made more deals between yourselves. You were always dealing each other. What was one of the best deals you ever made with Bonnett? And it could be for an off-road vehicle, could be for a rifle, it could have, I don't know what it would have been for, but you guys were, he was always up to something with Childress and Earnhardt.
You know, today it's hard to put your finger on one. I guess the greatest deal I made, he was a friend.
But in this garage, those grandstands, and at home, no one was ever a stranger to Neil Bonnett. And perhaps that is the greatest gift he leaves us.
Do you realize that until the Winter Show on National Network came along, Hueytown was best known for the Hueytown hum? Gives you pause for thought, doesn't it? Just kidding, Bobby, Donnie, Davy, and Hut. Folks, step into my laboratory and let me give you a demonstration of one law of physics that the 1992 Winston Cup champion Alan Kulwicki would agree with. When you're hot, you're hot. And when you're not, you're not. Now, y'all just think about that. When I see that, I'll be the first one to tell you, standing in front of this camera and not in that race car is not where I want to be. But I'll also be the first one to tell you I don't have any animosity to any driver on a racetrack for an accident. That's racing. You're going to put cars in places they shouldn't be at times. But when you're real careful, you don't win a lot of races. I was already living here in Hueytown. I was working as a pipe fitter and I was racing on the weekends. Then comes Bobby Allison, takes me under his wing, and we all went racing together. The Alabama gang. Me, Bobby, Donnie, and Red, all in a row. We used to love to hear people say it was our genius that made us winners. I'm here to tell you it was because we all stuck together. Hey, wait, time out, guys. Wait just a minute. This is my den, my show. You got my sweaters on. We're watching my wrecks and getting a chuckle out of it.
Yeah, Neil.
Hey, wait a minute. Oh, don't tell me to wait a minute. Crap's got to stop.
Wait a minute, sit down here.
Whoa, wait a minute. This is mine.
Well, no. Sit down here. Watch this. You ain't believe this one. This is good stuff now. We've been watching this for quite a while.
Yeah, but I heard you laughing down here.
No. This is Daytona. You blew up at the start-finish line.
You ain't never wrecked.
And you slid by. You just missed the end of this wall. Watch this. Just missed. Ooh. Was that close? You had control of it, didn't you?
Make that move right there.
That's true. That is. See, this is good stuff.
This is the heart of country. TNN, the Nashville Network. Race Day, today on TNN Motorsports.
Got to be a full moon.
Not. Bass bite better in the
full moon. Catching on dough balls.
The jig and pig catches the big one.
Fishing experts are an independent breed, and no two ever seem to agree.
Spinnerbait.
Crankbait.
Spinnerbait.
Except when it comes to TNN's fishing team, Team TNN. They all agree. TNN Outdoors is where the action is.
Walleyes. I like largemouth. We got saltwater catfish. Have them all. A crab.
Yes, definitely. We've shown an increase in sales, and we've had customers come in and mention that they've seen the ad on television. Yes, very much so. Cost per ad is very good, and the frequency of the ad on the commercials has a high impact on my sales.
TV advertising. Let it work for you. In Olean, contact Rob Fair, 1-800-323-1639, Box 2407.
Ace is the place, and Worth W. Smith Company Ace Hardware is the place for the best prices and widest selection of Carhartt clothing in the southern tier. The Putski family is back this year to outfit the whole crew from head to toe. Bib overalls, work pants and jeans, Arctic coats and jackets, full coveralls, new styles and fashion colors, toddler, youth, and adult sizes. Carhartt, the toughest outdoor wear you can buy. Available at Worth W. Smith Company Ace Hardware, the place for Carhartt clothing.
NHRA Today. The professor of pro stock holds a 7-second seminar. The funny car finish was straight out of
And welcome to Inside Winston Cup Racing. I'm at the Daytona International Speedway, where Speed Weeks got off to a sad start this year. The loss of Neil Bonnett in a practice accident here on Friday afternoon. Neil was looking forward to a 6-race schedule this year. He was one of the most popular drivers in NASCAR Winston Cup Racing and had become a very popular broadcaster as well. And certainly he will be missed in the sport. Lots going on here at Daytona for the next 10 days. For more on our tribute to Neil Bonnett, let's join Bill Weber in our studios in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Thank you, Ned, and good morning, everyone. It has been a difficult couple of days. We've lost a friend and a colleague. And in a moment, we'll glance into the past to recapture some of the many happy memories Neil Bonnett shared with all of us.
Inside Winston Cup Racing is brought to you by cold-filtered Miller Genuine Draft and Miller Genuine Draft Light, taking the country by storm. Goodyear, #1 in tires. And by Haviland Formula 3 Motor Oil. Add more life to your car.
Neil Bonnett brought enthusiasm and energy to the racetrack. He said his desire to get to the front and stay there probably cost him more times than he'd like to admit, but he enjoyed it all. Neil's no longer with us, but we will always have fond memories of his smile and his style. Neil Bonnett's cheerful smile and pleasant personality were homespun trademarks of this high-riding member of the Alabama gang. For 20 years, he was a part of the Winston Cup racing community, first as a driver, then a broadcaster, and last year returning to the track in Talladega, the site of his first Winston Cup race. Bonnett celebrated 18 Winston Cup wins beginning in Richmond in 1977. His long relationship with the Wood brothers took Neil to victory lane 9 times, including the World 600 at Charlotte in 1982. The following year, in a Raymont Chevy, he flashed across the finish line 0.8 of a second ahead of Richard Petty for back-to-back wins in the 600. He won twice in 83 and 85, and at Rockingham in 86. 1987 was interrupted by a shattered leg suffered in this crash at Charlotte. But in 1988, Neil was Comeback Driver of the Year. He took Hoosier tires to victory lane for the first time with a win at Richmond. His last victory came 2 weeks later at the North Carolina Motor Speedway in Rockingham.
Well, it's almost too much to think about. I've always liked to take things a week at a time, one race at a time, but my goodness, our bunch is stout right now. Our team's running. We're up there in the points thing. If we can maintain this consistency, we'll be a factor all year, I believe.
In 1990, Bonnett sustained severe head injuries in this crash at Darlington. Neil suffered memory loss and underwent long-term physical therapy. When he had this conversation with Randy Pemberton in July of 1990, it appeared his racing career had ended.
I should have had a lot more wins. I probably should have won twice as many races as I won, but I'll be the first one to tell you, if they let me regroup and go back through there again, I'd do it the same way. I had fun doing it. I enjoyed it. My numbers aren't all that great, but I tell you what, nobody had any more fun than I had doing it.
Neil really never left the sport. He moved into broadcasting, winning new fans as a race analyst. And he worked with his 29-year-old son, David, as he attempted to join the Busch Series. Neil patiently massaged his desire to return to racing. Then last year, with doctor approval, he returned to the track after a 3-year absence, qualifying for the Die Hard 500 at Talladega. This year, Neil planned to run a limited schedule. He was excited about the opportunity to climb back behind the wheel and compete again in the sport he loved so much. Neil Bonnett collected 18 Winston Cup wins, 20 poles, and nearly $4 million in career earnings. He leaves behind his wife Susan, his son David, his daughter Kristen, and millions of racing fans and friends who will long remember his soothing smile and Southern charm.
I can't tell the people enough, the fans out there, the cards and the letters. I'm not talking about the Neil Bonnett fans. I might put them in one sack. But I'm talking about the Darrell Walter, the Cale Yarbors, the Pettys, the Allisons that sent letters that we're a Walter fan, but we sure appreciate the effort you made in racing. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the fans. You never can pay the fans back enough. They stand on the other side of that fence, hanging on, pulling for you, and when you're down, they pull even harder, and I appreciate that.
It has been an emotional 2 days at Daytona, but as we all know, just as it was last summer when we lost Alan Kowicki and Davey Allison, the season must continue, as it will today, when 13 drivers battle in a sprint for cash in the Busch Clash. Randy Pemberton has our pre-race report from the track.
Today's NASCAR news brought to you by Texaco Haviland. Add more life to your car.
Bill, the first official order of business here for Speed Weeks 1994 took place on Thursday morning. It was there at the annual Busch Clash breakfast that 13 drivers drew for starting positions for the 16th running of the Busch Clash, which will begin shortly after 12 here in Daytona. Busch Beer presented each driver with a present and a position for the $300,000 sprint for last year's pole winners. Kenny Schrader, the pole position king in 1993, picked up where he left off. He'll start from the first spot, and wild card entry P.J. Jones drew the outside front row for the Melling Ford team. The next order of business was qualifying for the Daytona 500 by STP. That got underway on Saturday at 2:30. Only the front row was determined through time trials, and time trials, what an exciting event it was. Loy Allen Jr. grabbed the pole position for the Daytona 500, edging out 1993 Winston Cup champion Dale Earnhardt by just that much. Loy Allen Jr. turned a lap of 190+ miles per hour to capture the pole. He also won the pole in the ARCA race. 55 drivers took time. They will determine the starting positions for the Gatorade Twin 125s on Thursday. After Loy Allen's qualifying run here at Daytona, we had a chance to talk to him.
We're still in shock about it, but the team really earned it. During testing down here, the car kept getting faster and faster. The guys back at the shop just keep making more and more horsepower, and we got the car really tuned in good. Worked really well with the crew chief on the car and all the people down here with TriStar Motorsports. So we've had a lot of support, and I think that led a lot to this. It seems like the first time we were the new team this year, and also Hooters is back in Winston Cup, and we're really proud to be back in it with them. But they really worked hard, and the guys really deserved it.
If you're keeping track of the tire wars, Hoosier wins fight number 1. They were on Loy Allen Jr.'s car when he won the pole position for the 500. Bill, the Busch Clash is always an exciting race, and it plans to be today. Nonetheless, everyone wears heavy hearts down here, thinking and remembering of Neil Bonnett.
Thanks, Randy. A feeling we share with race fans everywhere. Ken Schrader starts on the pole today. He and P.J. Jones make up the front row. Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Bodine are in row 2. And row 3, it's Mark Martin and Jeff Gordon. Harry Gann and Rusty Wallace pair up in row 4. Ernie and